I have a question about the reality moving forward within civil procedure and how that deals with contract. And does the corpus juris secundum or the American jurisprudence still stand in law today as a defense or a litigation piece? Does this make sense?
No, I don't know exactly where you're coming from on that. I mean, those are big words, but they encompass a whole lot of different parameters, so you gotta
Okay.
narrow it down.
Let's say the corpus juris secundum, which falls back on constitutional law, right? The corpus juris secundum,
That's all law.
that's all of law, exactly.
Yeah.
So then you have the American jurisprudence, which is also American law when it first started in positive law, right? And the mechanisms between our rights and being in. Essentially, what I'm saying is, if I was going to go do a pro se case and I brought up to the judge and the prosecutor, okay, about American jurisprudence, and
They look at you like, okay, well, you know very little about what you're talking about.
you think they would look at me like I know very little?
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
American jurisprudence is just saying how the Americans decide things versus the way that the Germans or the British decide things. Everybody has law.
Right.
American jurisprudence is just the American way of doing things.
So
That's
if
all
I-
it is. It doesn't mean anything specific having to do with any certain area of law. It's just a general,
I-
broad,
Are you an attorney like in defense or an attorney in prosecution? Both?
depends. I don't do any criminal work, but I do civil work, and I prosecute and defend civil work.
Okay. So if you were going to defend somebody, wouldn't you use like certain codes and statutes in with the content or intent of their affidavit or something like that whenever you're trying to not necessarily argue, but
What are you defending among?
it's a situation of basically studying law outside the bar brings in where there's the people's law and public law, where people want to defend their own self, their nationality, their standing of jurisdiction. And so I know,
Trying to defend the law against the law?
not necessarily. What I'm doing is that there's rights that were already existing to man that as time has gone on, these rights have been contracted away.
Now, you're talking about
There.
natural law.
Natural law.
Of mankind
That's right.
is just something that's around regardless of government. Is that man has a right to live and breathe and walk the face of the earth. Okay?
Yep.
That's
Own property,
and
liberty.
just general morals of right and wrong.
Right.
Okay, that's natural law.
So,
When the government gets involved, they make other laws.
yeah, you're right.
So, and there has to be an order to society, so
There has to be an order.
there has to be
Well-
other laws.
If you follow God's law, that stands above what natural law does stand above, and then the common law, and then we have statutory law. And what I've discovered is that statutory law is applicable to 14th Amendment citizens through being in the jurisdiction of the United States, which is known as, even the state of Florida is known as the District of Columbia. When you study the definitions,
No, it's not.
yeah, I looked it up. The definition of state doesn't just mean the state of
You're
Florida.
trying to fight something.
All right,
that's
now,
not-
let me tell you what the word state means.
Okay,
England is a state.
yes.
France is a state. Russia's a state. We only call ourselves states in the United States because we started out as 13 independent colonies who all wanted to rule themselves.
Right.
So when you look at the Declaration of Independence right here,
Yes.
it says, the unanimous declaration of the 13, united is a little word,
Okay.
States of America is a big word because they were declaring themselves 13 different countries,
Yeah, basically, you're right.
okay?
Yep.
So the word state now people think of it in context of a smaller territory of a big country. No.
That's
it's
not what it is.
It's not.
Right.
Each state has its own constitution.
Yes.
Each state is its own government. They're united under that thing. Well, actually not. That was just a treaty to make war and break from England. The Constitution that came 13 years after that, or I don't know, however, 1776 till 1793, however long that was, almost 20 years. But that was the one that bound us all together.
Okay.
As 13 states that are still independent states, but they're all united for a common purpose. And if they can all unite, well, why can't they ununite?
Right,
And that was the problem with the Civil War, is that there was nothing in the Constitution says they couldn't.
It's still that way, right?
No.
Only certain
No.
states can't secede, right?
No. 14th Amendment does not.
So the creation of the
that.
14th Amendment,
14th Amendment, 15th and 16th are the Reconstruction Amendments after the Civil War, and
Right.
they changed it all.
they changed it all.
They said, basically, no, you can't do that anymore.
But I thought, so Abraham Lincoln, he was there to preserve the Union, which was a part of the several states, right? Which were the severable states.
It depends on which part of history you're looking at, as to whether he was trying to preserve the Union, or to
Dismantle it,
redefine it.
redefine it.
Because we had, for the first, I don't know, however many years, from 1793 up till 1860, before the Civil War, when the Civil War started, we had all these different states, and they were operating under the Constitution.
Right.
So there was combined law, but it was camaraderie, and there was no absolute set in stone that we're going to stay together as a country. And furthermore, when they signed this, from about right here to about right there is a list of grievances against the king.
Okay, yes.
So it's really, like when we feel like it, and in the ordinary course of
Sounds good.
life,
Yeah,
we
okay.
decide to be separate from England, and here's why. This was considered actually the most important part of the document back then. Nowadays we look up here.
It's still important.
But it says, because we're leaving, this is what we're doing. We're united.
This is why.
We're united together to be free and independent states. And where was the good line? It was to have full power of war, conclude peace and protect alliances, whatever. So it's basically saying that if
Everybody agrees.
we're united for the purposes of separating from England, and that's it.
Let's say the people choose to separate again from this tyrannical system that's growing out of control now. That is, and I'm not trying to be prejudiced. I'm trying to talk as an American that has a daughter that, as 14 years ago, I was looking at this world through a different lens, being like, wow, it's really getting crazy. How did it get this bad? And then through that process, I found out about the Act of 1871, which you just affirmed it for me and really made me be like, wow, so it's not a lie. And then because of that reconstruction of the government, that's where they created the United States citizen outside, like you said, these nation states, these separate nation states.
Now, the U.S. citizen was created in 1789.
1789?
Yeah.
Through like
There
Supreme
was
Court
actually several constitutions.
Okay.
1789 was the first one, and all it did was unite the states together for the purpose, four main purposes, really. Post office,
Okay. Military?
Navy,
Yeah.
and Army, and money.
Okay.
We went under a common U.S. dollar after that. We had a common mail system.
Yep.
Because none of the state, it wasn't working. Everybody had their own mail system, everybody had their own economics and dollars and whatever, and it just wasn't, nothing was working. Plus, you had piracy going in and invading all of the ports, and no one state could protect all their ports. So they came up with the common military.
Really?
You had the Continental Army, you had the Navy,
Yep.
and then the Post Office and the U.S. Treasury. That's the only things in 1789.
Okay.
In 1791, they came back to do it again and realized, well, we can't do that because nobody's agreeing on what to do. So they accomplished jack shit in 1791. 1793, they came back again, and this was the Fourth Continental Congress.
Okay.
Keep in mind, the first
So these
Continental,
are the reconvenings.
First Continental Congress was the people who broke off from England.
Right. Okay. I see what
Second
you're saying.
Continental Congress came up with a 1789 document. Third Continental Congress didn't accomplish jack shit. Fourth Continental Congress came up with the We the People document.
Okay.
That says whatever, and we're citizens of the United States. But the citizens of the United States was actually established in the 1789 document. More specific in the 1793 document, which we're still going under now, is the
Right.
Constitution.
So I heard through history that the original capital was in New York, and then then they reestablished it in Washington District of Columbia now.
Yeah.
So through, I believe it was 1865 is when the actual 14th Amendment was created, and
I don't know what year it was. It doesn't really matter.
I usually have my Constitution and my laws on me, and I didn't expect to come
You
here.
showed it to us before.
Yep, and I usually have it on me, but I'm going through, like, my mom died. That's why I'm actually back here.
I'm sorry for that.
Thank you. It's so thank you. And then my ex-girlfriend just recently died, so when you're getting older, you start to like lose these people, and it's like, oh man, this really hits home. So being back here, I'm looking back at where my mindset was versus where my mindset's at now, and I wish that I could have
But
put
why wouldn't you want to push forward?
I do push
After
forward. Sometimes emotionally, I get really set back on emotions. Like if I was married to you and we were having problems in our marriage and I was at work, I would much rather try to fix our relationship and the problem than to continue on at work. It would mess me up.
Are you allowed
So-
to vote?
What's that?
Are you allowed to vote?
Oh yeah. I became
And
a
you're
national.
going to.
What I'm doing is I'm becoming one of the
Be careful with that.
a state
You get
national.
tricked into a lot of you're
This is
free
what I'm
you're
saying.
free now kind of bullshit, and you're not.
This is
You're
the
in
year
your
to vote.
you just messed up a lot of liberties that
In
you
what?
actually are entitled to.
As a voter or a person that becomes an electoral voter and tries to become
As
a real
as
American.
person who suddenly doesn't have a driver's license and suddenly thinks that they don't have to pay taxes and thinks that they get away with scot-free on everything, and then they're just fighting the rest of their life because it doesn't make sense to anybody, especially the authorities. So why put yourself through all that friggin' trouble over something that really doesn't mean anything? Because if you get to the say, oh, I'm a U.S. national, I'm free,
National.
I'm now, you think that that's
You
gonna
just say you
exonerate
want to-
you from all the laws and prosecution and jurisdiction of the United States, and it doesn't. We could take somebody could come over here from Haiti or from France, it doesn't matter. If they commit a crime while they're here, we're gonna put their ass in jail.
Well, yeah.
They're not a U.S. citizen either.
I'm
We're gonna
with you
put
on
their
that.
ass in jail. Same thing with a U.S. national, and you see these guys on the internet all the time arguing
Well,
to
when
a
I
police
study
officer
or
saying,
at least
"You
learn
can't
about
do
it,
anything to me."
what I learned about it was through secured party creditor. So in order to become a secured party creditor, you have to become a national first. So then it's basically learning the UCC and banking law and how the name is a debtor and then you're the creditor. So what they're saying is that the name that was created at birth from your live birth record is a creature of law that they have control or jurisdiction over. This is why they want your names and your ID whenever they pull you over, because it's a contract and an interface between the
I
government.
don't understand any of that. I'm sorry.
No, it's
Oh,
okay.
God.
I do too. That's what really,
He's got a plan. The government,
I think a lot of
I
the
have to follow
Bible,
through, but God's got a plan, man. That's all I know. is, I don't care about
It makes
everybody
you go
else.
back to work?
Yes.
I am definitely not arguing anybody's
Happy
way
New
or
I just,
truths of life.
Alright, hold on, let's
Okay. Hey,
Oh,
he's
man.
pulling out some gold right now.
this is the Constitution, but it's the we the people thing. Cause I don't
Okay.
have one hanging on my wall, but this one, when you read it, it says, a lot of flowery languages, right?
Yep.
So when in the course of human events, it becomes necessary
yeah.
for one people
One people.
to dissolve
The political
the
bands,
political bands which
which have-
have connected them with another to the whatever.
They should
We
declare
hold
the
these
cause. Okay.
we hold these truths to be self-evident. That's this right here. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal,
Yep.
that they are endowed by their creator with certain laws and whatever, consent to be governed.
Certain unalienable rights. Among these are life,
Unalienable.
liberty, and the
Yeah.
pursuit of happiness.
Life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. All right, so you know that part.
Yep.
Well,
Secure these rights, governments are
that
among
was
men.
that was never part of United States law.
Okay. So that's
Life,
not.
liberty, and pursuit of happiness. We've been taught that all of our lives. That's the basis of American freedoms and life, right? Not codified in anything except for that, which is just a breakup letter with England.
Okay.
Okay. So and people looked at that and they said, look, if this is why we broke up with England and why we're doing all this, guess what they're going to do? They're going to come up and put that shit into the Constitution. Now let's just go.
In Article 5, or Amendment 5, they do talk about life, liberty, and property. But
Yeah, but
they
that's
said
not
you
the
can't
same.
have happiness without property.
Nah, that's not where we're talking about. We're talking about the 14th Amendment.
Okay, here we go.
So, Section 1. All persons born and naturalized in the United States are subject to the jurisdiction thereof, are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges and immunities of a citizen of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. Okay?
Okay.
That's your life, liberty, and property. That's
How
where
do
they
you-
bring it in.
Where do you define due process in your definition or scope of what due process
Due
is?
process of law is whatever hearing or whatever, like if you get arrested, obviously you got to get to see a judge within 24 hours. If you get a speeding ticket, they hold an administrative hearing. If you want to contest the ticket, that's your due process.
Okay. So
The due process is just by saying, hey, you get a chance to voice your opposition.
Okay.
That's it. That's
Perfect.
due process.
Yep.
If we can't just throw you in jail because we felt like it.
Right.
You get to say whether or not, whatever. So, representatives shall be apportioned to several states according to their respective numbers, counting the whole number of a person in each state, which previously they did the 3/5 compromise. That's
Okay.
actually in the Constitution under Article 4, I think it is.
Now is that 3/5 of the human being per
Slave.
So per slave. That's
Yeah,
right.
you counted slaves
So
as
they're
3/5
still
of a
actually
person.
putting it in here, in
No,
section
they're
2.
They're changing it.
Oh, they're changing it.
They're changing it with Amendment 14, saying you no longer count them. You count them as a whole person.
Okay, so they're a whole person,
Yeah.
no longer a 3/5 of. Okay.
Right.
Perfect.
The executive and judicial officers of the state, members of the legislature, denied any male inhabitants of such state being 21 years of age and citizens of the United States in any way abridged, except for the participation in rebellion and crime and the basis of representation or whatever the whole. All right.
We discussed this the other day about women's rights and everything, and if we could take each state to their own.
What I heard was this: as an American, before the 14th Amendment, which was the freeing of the slaves and making them U.S. citizens right away, okay? that you are a national. Like my grandmother taught me that there was a first-class citizen and a second-class citizen, and I had no idea what that meant until I discovered the Emancipation Proclamation of Abraham Lincoln, and how when you're born, you have authority as we the people and a state national or an American. This is what they say. And then through the years of the federal government growing between the District of Columbia, I wish I had my stuff with me, because I'd show you where it does say that the state, inside the legislative statutes and the definitions,
Every state has its, yeah.
the state is not just the state of Florida, but also the District of Columbia. And when you look up United States, it also says it has many different phraseologies.
Yeah.
Several states, each part towards the insulars, the continental, and then
You gotta look it up in the context of when it was written too.
And every state
Okay.
has their own
Yeah.
Supreme Court.
Because if they do,
Yes.
you can look back at the Dred Scott decision. That's in
That's
this-
where it started.
That's in this constitutional book here, but Dred Scott decision is a derelict of the law.
But isn't this where they mixed equity and law together, and because he wasn't affiliated within the railroad, right? This is the Dred Scott case with the railroad.
Mhm.
Because he wasn't signed into or an employee or a contract with them, they dismissed the case, where he didn't get a true settlement. So this is where people look at, well, if I'm not an employee of the United States, why am I subject to their constitutions, unconstitutional statutes, codes, and regulations, versus the Constitution having a broad language?
Yeah, but Dred Scott has been overruled so many times since then.
Okay. In
It's
what
like
way?
it's
What do
like
you mean?
recently they just
Right.
overdid Roe v. Wade.
Roe v. Wade.
They did that to Dred Scott a
Doesn't
long
mean it
time
wasn't
ago.
relevant.
But
It's
to me,
relevant to the
It's
formation of
relevant,
history
But it's not,
and
you-
formation of.
I think
yeah.
they did the Roe v. Wade thing because when they were trying to push the vaccines, I said, right away, I went to my employer and I said, well, okay, so if something happens to me, who's liable? And they said, you. I said, well, I ain't taking that thing. I'm all set.
who were you employed by?
It was up north in Maine. I was working for some company doing, basically construction, and was a subcontractor. So I was still an affiliate with this other individual as a subcontractor. In order to stay on, they were trying to.
Right, I remember that, yeah, you
So-
told us that.
I ended up using the Roe v. Wade argument as to my body, my choice, to say I'm all set with the vaccine, right? Because if
No.
women can have my body, my choice with abortions
Negative.
and those things, why can't I have the same exact right towards the same implications?
It's actually a good argument.
Yeah, so
All I can
people left me alone.
Tell both
and-
of you, if you have no uterus, you have no vote.
Well, what it's basically saying is that, because there's actually a public law.
Understood. We'll come up with your own.
Well,
No,
hold
they-
on. That's just a
that's a-
defense mechanism towards your true biological property is your own body. That
She's thinking of it only in terms of an abortion law.
right. I'm thinking
But
it in
that
a broader
legal
sense.
argument applies
Which
to
is
a
why
whole
you
lot of
should
different.
come up with your
Yes.
own.
Yeah.
Because if it wasn't for the Roe v. case, there would never be a argument to take it to the next level. And in fact, there is a public law passed during the COVID-19 pandemic from a Utah assembly and one in Ohio. And it's like public law A101021. Well,
Whatever it is.
yeah, it's basically talking about how they are taking back true body and ownership as being known as a real living man, not a corporate entity. And the language that it's written is very in depth towards anything that
Does
could.
it literally say man?
Yes, yes. You know what?
So no transgender, no anything.